Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Madam Secretary, you won't find this in the brief book, but thank you for your work with me on the Blackfeet tribe. As the gentleman from Oregon has said, that we've made a lot of promises, but not a lot of promises kept. In the case of the Blackfeet, we'd like your commitment that you'll continue to work with me and make sure the promise that was made to the great tribe is met.
We'll always work with you.
Okay, let's shift to critical minerals.
Okay.
So, Madam Secretary, is it your policy that critical minerals should be sourced from countries that are stewards of the environment, like the U.S. and our allies, or sourced from Russia and China that don't share our same values?
Congressman, what I'll say is the President is committed to...
Pretty much a yes and no. It's your policy, Madam.
Our policy is to work to make sure we have the best...
I'll take that as a maybe. So are you aware that China produces more emissions than any other country on the planet?
I have probably read that somewhere.
Are you also aware that China produces 90% of the world's plastic from 4 rivers?
I will take that as
You also are aware that China is the biggest offender on illegal fishing?
Thank you, Chair. Congressman.
Have you read the Department of Interior report on critical minerals dated December 17?
December 17th of 2021?
2017.
2017. I have not read that full report from 2017.
Are you aware that China controls by proxy production the supply chain of critical minerals that are critical to both the EV world and defense?
Thank you for that information.
Are you aware by multiple studies that in order to satisfy the present requirements of EV and critical minerals to defense, it would take an increase of 2,000% of mining for 20 years? Are you aware of that?
Thank you for the information, Congressman.
Are you also aware that northern Minnesota is home to those critical minerals that are necessary for EV and our Defense Department?
I think there are critical minerals across our country. Yes.
Did you, before you put a moratorium, did you identify and fast-track those sources of critical minerals that you just mentioned?
Are you talking about in Minnesota and the boundary waters?
You had mentioned that there's other places within the United States that also hold critical minerals that are required for the country. Did you identify those and have you fast-tracked the production or permitting
We are
or identification
in Minnesota particularly.
across our country?
Across
Can
our
you
country.
pick any place that you've identified for an alternative to critical minerals to fast-track so we're not vulnerable to China and Russia for our very critical economy, both in defense and EV?
We are working currently on identifying those critical minerals. That is with the U.S. Geological Survey, and of course
But you would identify, and you would agree that not having the critical minerals identified and produced in this country would present a security problem and prevent us from moving ahead on multiple issues, and we're vulnerable to China for very critical components of our economy. Would you agree?
Congressman, I know that energy independence is a priority of President Biden.
Thank you. Let's shift to one of my favorite topics, the Aleutian chain. As a SEAL, I've spent a lot of time in the Aleutian chain. So would you agree that pregnant women, either indigenous, native or not, deserve access to health care?
Absolutely.
Well, would you agree that the village of King Cove deserves that same access to health care?
I think every American should have access to health care.
Do you agree when the wildlife refuge was put in place by, I believe, President Jimmy Carter, did the village agree to give up their access to health care to the property that was traditionally theirs but then made into a refuge?
When I visited King Cove, they shared that information with me.
So is there a study that suggests a small acreage in the middle of the Aleutian chain that was designated to be a wildlife refuge, a small gravel road would be an environmental catastrophe to such that you would deny access to that village for health care?
Congressman, we are working to ensure that the village of King Cove has the access that they need. And
how would you
the
do that without a road?
conversations are
I've been there, and
ongoing.
I've been a SEAL and crossed the beach. I know when the weather is inclement, that nor a rotary wing or a boat will meet the requirement to go around the corner. But yet a road would, a small road. So how is this possible? You're working with them when you removed the ability for them to have that road.
Congressman, I have, two of my high-level staff were just in King Cove having conversations with the tribe, and I want to assure you that we care deeply about that tribe and want to make sure that they have access to the medical care they need.
And do I have your commitment, you'll work with this committee to make sure that the wonderful village of King Cove has access to health care?
I will absolutely work with this committee on any item that you bring forward to us.
Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
So it is recognized. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary Haaland, thank you for joining us today. Late last month, you testified in front of the Appropriations Committee. My friend and colleague, Mr. Reschenthaler, asked you about the mineral withdrawal in my district. You said, and I quote, "Well, we did a mineral withdrawal in the boundary waters," end quote. Secretary Haaland, do you understand why this statement that you made under oath is false?
Congressman, it is my understanding that we made a decision in this area.
Madam Secretary, I have to interrupt you. Do you understand why the answer that you made under oath is false? There is no mining in the wilderness area, and there is no mining in the surrounding buffer zone either. As the Secretary of the Interior and as a former member of Congress on this committee, you should have known there was never a proposal to mine in the boundary waters per the 1978 Act. Secretary Haaland, do you recognize the document behind me?
Would you like me?
Do you recognize that document?
It's
For those that don't know, it's the updated list of critical minerals released from your department last year.
Okay, yes.
Now do you recognize it?
Yes, sorry.
Okay, in your exchange with Mr. Reschenthaler, you said in reference to the minerals in the Superior National Forest that you banned, and I quote, "I don't know what kind of minerals were there. I don't think they were critical minerals," end quote. Well, as someone who works, lives, and recreates there, and as someone who has the privilege of representing the people that live there, let me tell you, those minerals that you banned include nickel, cobalt, palladium, platinum, and other group metals. Again, this is a list produced by your own department, Madam Secretary. And you told Mr. Reschenthaler that, quote, "I don't think they were critical minerals." That's unbelievable. Secretary Haaland, you claim the withdrawal that you forced upon my constituents is in the boundary waters. That's wrong. Do you now understand?
Congressman, I should have said that it was the Boundary Waters watershed.
Okay, so let's
watershed
correct it.
area.
Madam Secretary, I only have so much time. Let me correct it. You either misspoke or misled in the testimony. Which was it last week?
I should have added the word watershed, Congressman.
You don't think that the withdrawal included critical minerals. Again, that's wrong. You had to be told that there were critical minerals. It was only after the hearing that you made the changes. And today, you're making the changes because you had no idea. When Mr. Reschenthaler was asking you, you had no idea that the withdrawal was not in the boundary waters, and you had no idea that there were critical minerals that you banned in the boundary waters. So how can you, as a Secretary of Interior, not know where the wilderness is? And how can you not know that your agency withdrew critical minerals? You own this decision to take offline massive amounts of critical minerals we need for everyday life and our strategic national security. Your decision, Madam Secretary, is either purely political or ignorance. It's either ignoring your own agency's research or a political move to satisfy your radical anti-mining activists. This ill-informed decision has left the United States more dependent on China. Now that you've been given the facts, and you are willing to are you willing to rescind your order to withdraw the opportunity to mine critical minerals outside of the wilderness and the buffer zone?
Congressman, what I would like to say is that with respect to the mine that you are referring to, it was always called a copper mine, and copper is not on that list.
It has nickel and cobalt. It's the biggest copper nickel find in the world. In closing, I'd like to state for the record, this withdrawal, according to the Forest Service, includes a taconite and copper ban as well. And Madam Secretary, the Iron Range in northern Minnesota mines iron ore that makes 80% of this nation's steel. And you banned taconite. Taconite is included in the ban that you supported and signed. I'll enter my documents into the record. And again, it's frustrating that you made a decision without any knowledge whether there was critical minerals in there. And you made the decision thinking that the mining was going to happen in the boundary waters. You were mistaken. Per the 1978 Act, there was never going to be mining in the boundary waters or the buffer zone. Again, you had no idea when you made that decision what critical minerals were in there, and furthermore, you had no idea that we had project labor agreements to put union men and women to work for generations.
Mr. Chairman, has the time expired, or is there more hyperventilation that we need to endure?
I yield back.
I have given leeway to several others. So,
Mr. Chairman.
I'm from Texas. Mr. Hunt, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you so much, Madam Secretary, for being here. Thank you for your time. Really, really appreciate it. Wind and solar are booming. And I know that because I'm from Texas. And when I drive across my great state, I could see the industry growing at a pretty rapid pace. In your written statement, you state that your budget builds in on the, quote, tremendous growth accomplished by renewable energy programs last year. My question for you is, should growth in the oil and gas industries keep pace with the growth in the wind and solar industry?
Congressman, I think the idea is to move our clean energy transition forward in a way that it can help a lot of Americans to have more affordable energy costs. But I think the idea of a transition is to move to a clean energy economy, and that way we don't have so much dependence on a finite resource such as oil.
Okay, so do you think the workers in the oil and gas industry deserve the same level of certainty in the future as workers in the wind and solar industries?
I want to assure you that we are always in communication with every piece of activity on our public lands. We are in touch with the folks whose industries they affect.
Well, the Biden administration says that we will be moved off of gas-powered government vehicles by the year 2035. So I would argue that that's the direct opposite of job certainty. But as an Apache helicopter pilot and somebody that's spent a lot of time in the military, I don't think that's possible. And I'm gonna tell you why. I'm not a big fan of the word transition at all, to be honest with you. Okay. The reason why I'm not a big fan of the word transition is because, actually, according to Bill Gates, if every single American drove an EV tomorrow, we would only reduce the demand of a barrel of oil by 8%, which means that the microphone that I'm speaking in, the glasses on your face, the clothes on your back, literally everything that we use is a byproduct of our industry. And you made a statement as well. You said as we move forward, we will continue to have oil and gas continue to be part of the mix. What do you mean by being part of the mix? And for how much time do you think we're going to be in part of the mix? Because I think it's going to be for a very long time, at least in my lifetime.
Of course, it's hard for me to predict how long into the future that fossil fuels will be a part of our energy mix. But as I mentioned, the idea is to move more to a clean energy future. That provides a lot of jobs for folks. And we will continue to make sure that we can have jobs for folks in that industry.
So do you think that the federal government should do more to regulate the oil and gas industry?
I'm not quite sure I understand what you mean by that, but we have certain obligations to.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is,
anything
do you think we should stifle, as in the federal government reach into the private sector to stifle the growth of one industry in order to promote another industry?
So for our part at the Department of the Interior, we manage our public lands. So we only have management authority over our public lands, not on any state or private
Right.
land.
Right.
So it's up to those folks what they do. But for our part, we have to manage our public lands according to the law and with respect to the best management practices because they belong to all the Americans.
Yes, ma'am. So would you support an equitable approach to the growth of wind and solar potentially on federal lands and also allowing us to continue to drill for natural gas and oil on federal lands at an equal pace without the government infringing upon that sectors?
Well, with respect to gas, leasing gas, oil permits, those move forward. We follow the law. Somebody submits a permit to drill. We, in good faith, move that permit forward in a process. So we aren't working to stifle anyone. We're working very hard to make sure that that everybody is treated fairly.
Okay. And lastly, I'm going to shift gears here real quick. I only have a few more seconds here. In your written testimony, you said the Interior continues to work across the department to expand equity, diversity, and inclusion. What exactly does that mean?
It means that we want our department to look like America. We want everyone to have an opportunity to be a part of our really wonderful department that cares for our public lands and our cultural heritage.
Let me add one more thing, and then I will close on this, ma'am. The word that I think is missing from this statement, though, is also qualified. Qualified. When I flew on a plane from Houston here today, I did not peek my head in the cockpit and say, I hope every pilot met their diversity and inclusion goals. What I really wanted to make sure is that the people that were in front of that plane could fly it, so we didn't crash it. So I understand the idea of being more inclusive. I understand the idea of being more diverse. I've been Black for my entire life, but I also want to make sure that we also talk about the most qualified person gets the job. And with that, I yield back my time, sir. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you,
Gentleman's
ma'am.
time's expired. Ranking Member Grijalva, it appears we're down to the final two, and I hope we can maintain decorum and order.
Well, unless you lose.
I recognize the gentlelady from Wyoming. Ms. Hageman, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, have there been any new coal leases or lease modifications approved, either for thermal or met coal, under your leadership at the Department of Interior?
Thank you, Congresswoman. I know that this met coal question came up earlier. We're happy to have the BLM or someone from that bureau be in touch with you about that. I couldn't say specifically which projects have been approved or permitted and which haven't.
Well, are there any outstanding coal lease or lease modification applications currently pending before the Department of Interior?
Congresswoman, I'm more than happy to make sure that we can get that list to you if that's okay with you. But the BLM is committed to the district court that reinstated the coal leasing program moratorium, that it will initiate the remedial environmental analysis shortly. So we are working on this issue.
You don't have an answer for my question as you sit here today?
Congresswoman, we'll be happy to get back with you about the number of permits, if that's what you're asking.
Do you know how long the applications that are pending before the DOI have been pending, and what is the reason for the delay?
Congresswoman, I know that our staff works on permitting every day. It's hard to say why some take longer than others. However, I do want to let you know that the BLM has made me aware of the importance of the project that you were talking about.
Okay. Madam Secretary, do you believe energy poverty is a good thing?
I don't know the term, ma'am.
You've never heard of the phrase energy poverty?
I have not heard of that term, but
Probably pretty self-explanatory, though, don't you think?
well, I think what we're really trying to do with our clean energy goals is make energy more affordable for
Okay,
every
but-
single American.
So I'd like you to answer my question, which is, do you believe energy poverty is a good thing? In other words, that people going into poverty are being unable to afford food or medicine or things like that because of the rising cost of energy. Do you think that's a good thing?
Congresswoman, I understand the challenges that many Americans face. I raised my child as a single mom
Okay.
and had to decide whether I could pay the rent or my student loans or
So you-
even
so
my
you-
gas bill. So I understand that. It's
Yes,
very
so-
difficult.
Yes, so you agree that energy poverty is not a good thing, is that right?
I want to say that we are working very hard to make energy more efficient and more affordable, which
Well-
is why we're moving forward on our clean energy goals.
But that isn't the case. Coal is an affordable energy, isn't it? It has been for decades.
I know that our country relied on coal for a very long time, and we're very grateful for so many of the workforce that powered our nation for a
Right,
very long time.
and coal is an affordable energy, isn't it?
Ma'am, I want to say that President Biden believes in energy independence for our country, and I believe that using different energy sources around the country will help communities everywhere and
Including
will
coal?
keep energy more affordable.
Including coal and oil and gas, correct?
Congresswoman, we are in a transition currently to a clean energy future, and I believe very strongly that we will get there, and energy will be more affordable
So
for
then
every
energy
American.
poverty is a policy of this administration, from what I can tell from your answers.
Congresswoman, we are working very hard to make sure that all Americans can access affordable energy, and that's one of the reasons why we are working hard on this
But your
transition.
policies do the exact opposite, which increase the cost of energy, correct?
Congresswoman, President Biden truly understands the challenge of working people, and we want to make
Okay.
sure that energy can be affordable for every American.
Madam Secretary, do you know what the recovery criteria is for the greater Yellowstone grizzly bear?
I beg your pardon?
Do you know what the recovery criteria is for the greater Yellowstone grizzly bear?
What I know is that the grizzly bear is, although it's maybe thriving in some places, it is not thriving in other places.
Okay, do you know the recovery criteria for the greater Yellowstone grizzly bear?
I'd be happy to get back with you with that specific answer, ma'am.
Well, it's roughly 600 to 700 is the recovery criteria. Do you know how many bears are currently living in the greater Yellowstone recovery area?
Congresswoman, I don't have the number of grizzly bears in front of me at the moment, but I'm
Okay,
happy to get back
were you
with
aware then that there are over 1,100 grizzly bears in the greater Yellowstone area?
I appreciate you sharing that information with me.
Okay, thank you, I yield back.
Gentlelady's time's expired. The chair recognizes the gentlelady from Oregon. Ms. Hoyle, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
And my sincere thank yous for the work that you're doing, that your staff is doing. I yield back to the chairman, sir.
Gentleman yields back. I have a couple of items to submit to the record here. The first is the section 70203, labeled the Presidio Trust. This is from the draft IRA bill that was heard in this committee on September 2021. and it does have language in it that says, in addition to the amounts otherwise available, there is appropriated to the Presidio Trust for fiscal year 2022, out of any money in the Treasury not otherwise appropriated, $200 million to remain available until September 30th, 2026. And again, this was the draft bill that was heard in this committee. It was highly objected to by our side of the aisle for a special, not even an earmark for Speaker Pelosi, but just a direct expenditure for the Presidio. So we objected to that, and also I'm submitting to the record Public Law 117-169 from August 16, 2022, also known as the IRA Act. This is the law that was passed. It says under Section 50224 under the National Park System Deferred Maintenance, in addition to the amounts otherwise available, there is appropriated to the Secretary for fiscal year 2022, out of any money in the Treasury not otherwise appropriated, $200 million to remain available through September 30th, 2026 to carry out priority deferred maintenance projects through direct expenditures or transfers within the boundaries of the National Park System. That is the law. Without objection, it's so ordered. So, Secretary Haaland, I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for questions. It's clear in the law that it was not the intent of Congress for $200 million to go to Presidio Park. Actually, would you agree or disagree that by the fact that it was $200 million in the hearing and the final law for Presidio, and in the final law, it specifically did not say Presidio, how would you say that has congressional intent for $200 million to go to Presidio Park?
Congressman, first I would just like to say that we're all very proud to have the Presidio as a public land that belongs to all Americans. So,
But do you believe that's intent or not intent?
it is my understanding that we merely implemented the congressional intent on the deferred maintenance provision in the Inflation Reduction Act with respect to
so
the Presidio.
The law specifically does not say Presidio. You've testified earlier that you or no one in your staff spoke to former Speaker Pelosi's office. So how did you determine that it was congressional intent to send all $200 million of deferred maintenance to Presidio Park? I mean, the perception is that this was a payoff to Speaker Pelosi for getting the IRA passed, that this is an issue she pushed and continued to push and got it stuck into the IRA. And then her friends in the administration turned around and sent that money to Presidio, even though there was high objection from Congress for putting that money specifically there. So how do you dispel that perception?
Chairman, I want to assure you that we follow the law on every single thing that we do. I cannot speak to the specifics of the situation at this time.
There were $200 million specifically sent to your agency for maintenance backlog, and all of it went to the Presidio Park, which was not the intent of Congress. I want to move on. You've talked about a climate crisis, and there's also a perception that that this administration has put an all-out attack on domestic energy. I think the actions of this administration and your department would substantiate that. But you've presented a different picture here today. You've said that under your leadership, there's more production of oil and gas on federal lands than ever before. Is that correct?
Yes, Chairman.
So do you take credit for that, or do you think that's because of actions that have happened before, or does the Biden administration take credit for that?
Well, I mean, I don't think we go to work every day thinking about who's going to get credit for what. We're just doing our jobs.
So
And
how
when permits
much
come through, we...
How much of that production would you say has happened on permits issued under this administration?
Well, we have certainly approved many applications for permits to drill. That's our job. We're following the law with respect to that. If land is leased and folks have rights to the land and they submit an application for a permit to drill, we have to process
Do you think
it.
there's an energy crisis in our country? You've talked about a climate crisis. Do you think there's an energy crisis?
Chairman, I know that President Biden is committed to energy independence for our country. That's the
I've heard
reason why
that.
we are going gangbusters on our clean energy transition. Those are viable sources of energy that we are working to
So on-
lift up.
At the end of March, we passed H.R. 1, the Lower Energy Cost Act. We had a press conference in the middle of the afternoon. Later in the afternoon, the country's focus was shifted towards the Manhattan DA, and under the radar the next day, OPEC announced a supply cut on oil. And today, gasoline prices are 6.8% higher than they were at the end of March because OPEC has control of the dial on the price at the gas pump. Do you think if the U.S., are you committed to producing more energy in the U.S. of all the above energy? And the world didn't get the memo on the transition. This is global consumption of energy by fuel source. The transition that gets talked about here is what I can hardly see from where I'm sitting, wind and solar. From here to here is all carbon emitting sources. That's what's happening on the world market today. You've talked about removing dams in Mr. Bence's district. The largest component of non-carbon emitting energy is hydropower. Yet this administration gives lip service, tries to create the perception that it's about all of the above energy, that we're producing more energy on federal lands than ever before. Yet I think we're ignoring the facts, and there's not an all-out effort to increase all forms of energy. I know 30 gigawatts of wind power by 2030. Guess what? China built 38 gigawatts of coal-powered plants last year, and they'll build that many again this year. So that's a tiny drop in the bucket to get to the point that we need to go. Or to get to. So my final question is, are you committed to an all of the above energy strategy that lowers cost for Americans? Are you committed to reducing the permitting debacle that keeps not just traditional energy projects from happening, but from new energy sources such as wind and solar? Can we work together to make those things happen?
Chairman, pardon me. We're always willing to work with you in your office. Our door's open. Please reach out to us when you would like. We are committed to energy independence for our country. We believe very strongly that for our part in the Department of the Interior, moving our clean energy sources forward are one component of our vast energy production resources. And of course, we're willing to work with anyone to make sure that our country is set for the future. I really do have to say that all of this is because climate change is the crisis of our lifetime. We have an obligation to future generations to make sure that we have a planet for them to live on. And that's why I'm here, and that's why I'm working incredibly hard to make sure that we can realize that transition, that we can have differing energy sources. We can't continue to be a one industry country. We're expanding. We're proud of the expansions we're making. We're going to continue to work very hard. And certainly all the career staff who are working diligently to move any and all permits forward, they'll continue with your help on our budget, and we appreciate very much you listening to me today as well.
And thank you, Secretary. And I'll just close by saying that I think we're all working towards the most affordable, reliable, and cleanest energy for the future, but we have to use common sense in that, and we can't ignore the data, ignore the facts, and ignore the logic, and get blinded by an emotional argument that is very real, but we also need to be realistic in the policies that we make and the way that those policies are executed. Again, thank you for your valuable testimony, and thank you to the members who participated today. There may be some additional questions by members of the committee, and we'll ask you to respond to those in writing. Under Committee Rule 3, members of the committee must submit questions to the committee clerk by 5 p.m. Eastern on April 22nd. The hearing record will be held open for 10 business days for these responses. If there is no further business, without objection, the committee stands adjourned.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Haaland, the Mineral Leasing Act requires the department to hold quarterly lease sales in each state with federal oil and gas resources. That's one lease sale every 3 months in each state with the resources. So in the 9 quarters since President Biden took office, the department has held a grand total of 1 lease sale in each of these states, a single lease sale in over 2 years. Now, I'm glad to see the department has now announced plans to hold lease sales in the 2nd and 3rd quarters of this year. My question is, will you commit to resuming oil and gas lease sales each and every quarter going forward as required by law?
Thank you very much for the question, Senator. And of course, we follow the law in everything we do. We have had lease sales. We'll continue to have lease sales. I know that President Biden believes in energy independence, and we're working toward that goal.
Well, let me just point out, you just said we follow the law, but you haven't followed the law. Under oath, during your confirmation hearings, you sat here and you said, I will absolutely follow the law. But yet, for 9 quarters since President Biden took office, the department has held only 1 lease sale. So I don't know how you consider that following the law. So the question again is, will you commit to resuming oil and gas lease sales each and every quarter going forward as required by law? Yes or no?
Senator, we will always follow the law.
You haven't been following the law. Yes or no? Please answer the question. Yes or no? Will you commit, sitting here, to resuming oil and gas lease sales each and every quarter going forward as required by law?
Senator, in 2022, we had lease sales in Wyoming, Colorado, Montana, the Dakotas, Nevada, and New Mexico.
1 lease sale when the required law required that you have had 9 quarters worth of leases. So you haven't been following the law. Yes or no going forward?
We are planning 12 onshore lease sales that are in the planning process for 2023. And we're currently planning multiple sales in Wyoming beginning in June, Montana and North Dakota also beginning in June, with additional sales in September and December, Utah, Nevada, and New Mexico, which could be
we know what all the public land states are. That's a good list. The question is, going forward next year, will you commit to following the law each and every quarter as required by law?
Senator, we will follow the law.
Well, you haven't been doing it so far. Let me move on, Mr. Chairman. Last month, the Bureau of Land Management proposed a fundamental change in American land management policy. This illegal proposal, and it is illegal and it doesn't follow the law, would make non-use of lands a competing use. Your proposal would give radical environmentalists a new tool to block activities that are guaranteed in the law, such as grazing, recreation, and mineral development. Please explain why you think putting large swaths of federal lands off limits upholds the multiple use mandate in the law.
Senator, thank you very much for the question. And the public lands rule is actually a proposed draft rule currently in public comment period that would essentially put conservation on equal footing with our multi-use mandate. It would not foreclose other uses of our public land, such as grazing or mining or energy development.
Well, the so-called public lands rule that you referred to is nothing more than a thinly veiled attempt to eliminate economic activities on federal lands in Wyoming and across the West, and I would strongly urge you to withdraw this disastrous and illegal proposal. Next, earlier this year, you blocked access to federal minerals in an area that contains 88% of our nation's known cobalt reserves. Cobalt's a critical mineral necessary for electric vehicle batteries. Do you know where most of the world's cobalt is mined today?
I beg your pardon, sir?
Do you know where most of the world's cobalt is mined today?
I'm sure you'll tell me.
Well, it's the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So in your view, does the Congo or the United States have better environmental standards?
Senator, the United States has better environmental standards and better worker standards.
So in your view, does the Congo or the U.S. have better protection against child labor?
Senator, with respect to the issue you're speaking of, I assume that it's the Boundary Water watershed, and that was put to us as a copper mine, not as a cobalt mine.
So why are you blocking access, though, to our nation's cobalt resources? You can't possibly be willing to ignore what's taking place in the Congo. It's been all over the news for years. Here are a couple of headlines in terms of the mine that you blocked. National Public Radio: how modern-day slavery in the Congo powers the rechargeable battery economy. The Independent: here it is better, they said, not to be born. Cobalt mining for big tech is driving child labor and deaths in the Congo. The Guardian: like slave labor and master, DRC miners toil for 30 cents an hour and fuel electric cars. The New York Times, Newsweek: go after any of them. Again, why are you blocking access to our nation's cobalt resources? Because that's what you've done.
Senator, near the Boundary Waters watershed, it was put to us as a copper mine. Copper is not a critical mineral in this country.
This is a mineral that is needed to fulfill the president's goal on electric vehicles. It's straightforward. You can't get critical minerals without mining. Mining in America is better for our economy. It's better for the environment. It's better for the people of the world. You need to stop blocking access to our nation's resources. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to the witnesses for being here. Secretary Haaland, if I could just start with you. I want to ask you about this memo from the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management that leaked a few weeks ago that suggests that your department, I'm looking at the memo now, that suggests that your department has been prioritizing a climate change agenda over energy security in this country. And I just want to get to the bottom of this and see if this is true. The memo concerns Lease Sale 258 in Alaska, the Cook Inlet project. And I just want to quote from the memo, which I have in front of me. If the Cook Inlet prospect would be developed, there would be additional government revenues and greater energy security for the state of Alaska. The memo goes on. Nevertheless, it's quite a transition. Nevertheless, because of the challenges facing the nation from climate change, BOEM is not, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management is not recommending this option. And what the memo says is that the government ought to charge 18.75% in royalties, the maximum take allowed under the law, instead of a lower rate that would actually lead to more development. Now, did you agree with this analysis?
Senator, thank you for the question. And of course, royalty rates are such that because our public lands belong to every single American, that Americans should get a fair return on the land that is used for this purpose.
But did you agree with charging the highest possible rate in order to discourage bids on the project because of climate change?
There is, the royalty rates are, I mean, that's not a surprise. That royalty rate is evident in other parts of the country. And I will say that with respect to our Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary, that is her department, that is her bureau, and I honestly, she takes care of that. She took care of that issue.
Well, but you're the secretary, so presumably you understand what's going on in your department. This is an extraordinary memo, and I just want to make sure that I understand what your position is. The memo says that a lower rate, the 16.67 rate to be precise, would have offered greater energy security. That's a quote from the memo. I have it. This is in public. Anybody can read this. Mm-hmm. That would have offered greater energy security. But your department recommended a significantly higher rate that you thought would likely lead perhaps to not developing, not moving forward with the project for the purpose of climate change. You didn't want this to go forward. You didn't want Alaska to have greater energy security because you said climate change. I'm just trying to understand, do you agree with that analysis? And you did indeed impose the higher rate. In fact, the lease sale 258 earned just one bid. So it looked like the strategy worked. I just want to know, do you agree with that we should trade off energy security for this country in favor of a climate change agenda?
Senator, what I can tell you is that the royalty rate for the leases was the most reasonable balance of environmental and economic factors for the public and was consistent with the IRA requirements. Additionally, of course, yes, we are in the midst of a terrible climate crisis, and it's our job to balance those things, to create a balance on our public lands, because our public lands belong to every single American.
Okay, that sounds like a yes to me. So you're telling me, yes, you think that charging more and trading off energy security, sacrificing energy security in favor of the climate change agenda is the right trade-off?
Senator, this royalty rate was consistent with the IRA requirement.
Well, yeah, it's the highest. It's consistent in the sense that you couldn't charge more than that. I mean, the memo lays this out. You selected the highest possible tax, essentially, in order to discourage development, and you succeeded in it. What's amazing is the memo, and listen, kudos to the person who wrote the memo, because they're very honest. They say we could have energy security or we could have the climate change agenda. Energy security needs to be sacrificed. Let's go with climate change. And you're telling me that you agree with that. I just have to say, I think that is a disastrous trade-off, and I can't improve upon the comments offered by one senator who said, I'm appalled by the contents of this memo, which make crystal clear that this administration is literally putting their radical climate change agenda ahead of the needs of the people of Alaska and the United States. That was the chairman. Mm-hmm. He was absolutely right about that. Well said, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to register that I think that this decision to sacrifice our energy independence and energy security in favor of an agenda that is making us dependent on China, that is making us dependent on OPEC, that is making us dependent on every dictator around the world is a disastrous choice for the working people of this country. My time's expired. I have some more questions, but I'll give them to you for the record. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to come back, Madam Secretary, to this trade-off between energy security and the radical climate change agenda that you've endorsed, which is less energy security for America, radical climate change agenda. On the subject of these sweeping mandates related to electric vehicles that the Biden administration has imposed, including now for our military, the metals needed to make the lithium-ion batteries in those vehicles are, of course, lithium, nickel, graphite, and cobalt. Now, can you tell me what nation is the largest producer of refined lithium in the world?
No, I can't.
It's China. Can you tell me which nation is the largest producer of refined cobalt in the world?
No, Senator.
It's China. Do you know what nation is the largest exporter of natural graphite to the United States globally?
No, Senator.
It's China.
Okay.
So in all of these instances, these mandates, your decision to trade off our energy security in favor of a radical climate change agenda is making us more and more dependent on China. And at the same time, you are denying mining, blocking permits for mines in this country that would allow us to develop nickel and copper and cobalt. Why? Why block the development of these resources in our own nation in favor of making us dependent on China?
Senator, are you referring to the Boundary Waters?
I'm referring to the
withdrawal?
Twin Metals mine in Minnesota. I think that Senator Bross was just asking about.
Yes, near the Boundary Waters, which is an iconic place and, of course, a very valuable ecological system to many plants, animals, species.
But jobs for, let me just say this though, jobs for blue-collar workers in this nation are valuable resources. The livelihood and well-being of American families are valuable resources. The ability of America to have our own industry and not be dependent on China is a valuable resource. Why should those things for millions of Americans be sacrificed in favor of your agenda for radical climate change?
Senator, I know that there's like 1.9 jobs for every American in the country right now, so I know there's a lot of jobs.
Wait a minute. You're telling me you've got too many jobs in the country?
Well, I'm saying that we don't have enough people. That's why we are having a hard time finding folks to work at our department. But
Oh, wait, you're telling me that we have too many jobs for blue-collar work? Have you seen the number of jobs we have lost in this country to China in the last 20 years? Do you know where those jobs come from? Over 3 million jobs have gone to China. Do you know where those jobs have come from? They've come out of Midwestern towns like the ones I represent. They are blue-collar workers, and you're sitting here and telling me that we have too many jobs in this country? Are you serious?
Senator, we are working hard every single day. We have processed 20 mining applications, 20 mines or mining modification permits since January of 2021. We are moving forward. We're doing our jobs. We're fulfilling our mission for
You're not moving forward. You're moving backward. You're shutting down and denying permits for mines in this country where we can develop our own resources. You're shutting down oil and natural gassing permits. You're approving taxes and royalties that deliberately suppress American energy development in favor of a climate change agenda. And now you're sitting here and telling me we've got too many jobs in this country. We've got gobs of jobs in this country. We don't need any more jobs in this country. I want to take the strongest possible exception to that comment and to that entire mentality, which I think is very honest. I think it reflects the mentality of your administration, which is when it comes to blue-collar workers in this country, you're on your own. Good luck. Good luck to you. We got plenty, just shut up and go get a job at McDonald's, whatever. No more, quit complaining about the loss of American industry. I mean, good Lord, that is extraordinary. What an extraordinary response.
May I say something, Senator?
Absolutely, the rest of the time's yours.
Thank you. Contrary to that, we have created a number of jobs. We have an orphan gas program where we've capped orphan oil and gas wells, an abandoned mine reclamation project that has lifted whole communities up in reclaiming their mine lands that have devastated their communities. These folks have been out of jobs for years, and now because of the bipartisan infrastructure law, because of the Inflation Reduction Act, they found new ways to engage and not only have jobs, but have a vision for what they want their communities to look like. We have plugged orphan gas wells in people's backyards in Pennsylvania, and we're doing so in California and Texas. These are communities that rely on this government to find a way forward for them. There is, unfortunately, a dearth of legacy pollution in this country. Those are jobs, good-paying, well-paying jobs with benefits that Americans are having because of President Biden and his policies, and we're proud to move those issues and those programs forward for the American people.
My time has expired. I'll just say in conclusion again, trading off American energy security in favor of your radical climate change agenda, shutting down good-paying American jobs in our energy sector, and then saying the explanation is we've got plenty of jobs in this country, I think is the most potentially, and this is quite a high bar, I might add, the most unbelievable statement I have heard from a member of this administration, maybe in my time in the Senate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I want to thank all of you. Now we have Senator Risch.
Well, thank you very much. Secretary, thank you for coming. As you know, the federal government owns 2 out of every 3 acres in Idaho, 67%. So it's always interesting to meet with a person who's actually has more to say and more control over our lands than Idahoans do. So thank you for coming. I want to focus on one thing today, one thing and one thing only, and that is the Lava Ridge Wind Turbine Project in Idaho. Have you heard of it? Okay. You heard of it because Congressman Simpson, Congressman Fulcher, twice this year have raised it with you in hearings. Is that right?
I think they got it, but that's okay.
Yes, I believe so.
And they told me that at that time you didn't know anything about it, but that you were going to look into it. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, I suppose.
Okay. So what have you found out?
Thank you, Senator. And
you don't need to thank me. Just answer the question.
well, thank you for the question.
Well,
The BLM has been engaged with stakeholders, including the state, local, counties, grazing permittees, tribes, and other federal agencies early on in the process. It's coordinated with the Idaho Resource Advisory Council and the Lava Ridge Wind Project are RAC committee, subcommittee, and the BLM has also coordinated with DOI's collaborative action and dispute resolution staff to engage stakeholders with ties to the Minidoka historical site.
That's great. What did you find out with all this coordination and discussion and meetings?
We're going to continue to engage.
No, what did you find out?
Well, I think the conversations are ongoing, Senator.
Well, what did you find out so far? Nothing?
The conversations are ongoing.
What did you find out so far?
I don't have a complete readout of all the meetings.
Give me an incomplete readout. What did you find out so far?
Well, I think they're gaining insight into how the community feels and what they have to say.
And what have you found out so far?
Senator, I'm happy to update you as the
All right.
time goes.
Let me help you out here. So try to get you some information on this. Do you know how many acres are involved in this?
I beg your
Do you
pardon?
know how many acres are involved in this?
I don't have the number of.
146,000 acres. You consider that a fairly significant piece of real estate?
I think 146,000 acres is a large acreage, yes.
It is. They're talking about 378 turbines. The smallest ones are just slightly bigger than the Statue of Liberty. The largest turbines are, have you ever been to Seattle?
Yes, sir.
Seen the space tower? Or the Space Needle?
I don't think I've seen Space Needle, but.
Well, the Needle, whatever it's called, the building, the big tall building there.
No, I have not.
Okay. Well, the largest turbines will be 100 feet taller than this structure in Seattle. Right now I know the administration is interested in renewable energy, and I think everybody in Congress is also. This will turn out about 1,000 megawatts of power. Idaho already puts out 75% of its energy generated using renewable power. And it's a combination of a number of things, falling water, nuclear, and other things. It's stunning to us that you would think of 144,000 acres for 1,000 megawatts. And let me tell you why. We're in the next 24, 36 months, we're going to be turning on 3 small modular reactors, 36 acres. 36 acres, and it'll put out about the same as this 146,000 acres. I know you love the land. Everybody does. I want you to take a quick look at this picture of a rendering of what the landscape out there will look like. Ayla, could you hand that to her for me, please? And I want you to look at this closely. Look at the horizon where you can see these structures coming up, and tell me if that's your vision of what public lands should look like. And by the way, that's a view from the Minidoka Historical Site. Do you know what the Minidoka Historical Site is?
I have not been there, Senator.
Do you know what it is?
It's an historical site.
Well, let me tell you what it's a historical site for. It was one of the detention sites during World War II for Japanese people, of which we have a significant population in Idaho. This land means a lot to them. This is what it looks like from there. Tell me, look at the horizon and tell me, is that your vision for what public lands should look like?
Senator, did you say this is a rendering?
It is.
So they superimpose those on?
Exactly. By looking at that, you can stand at the historical site and look to the horizon and see what our public lands will look like on this 146,000 acres, as much as is that your vision of what public lands should look like?
Senator, I think there's a lot of visions for public lands across.
No. Don't give me that. Is that your vision for what public land should look like in America?
Senator, we have millions of acres of public lands all over the country, and they all look different.
Do you like that?
Senator, I understand what you're saying. I want you to know that we care deeply about we listen to people. We get their input.
I'm glad you're listening to people, because let me tell you who you should be listening to. First of all, you have a Resource Advisory Council, a RAC committee there, do you not?
Yes.
Do you know what they've said about this? Your council, you know what they said unanimously about this?
Please tell me, Senator.
Don't do it. We have a legislature in Idaho, Republicans and Democrats. They passed a resolution in both the House and the Senate, unanimously bipartisan. You know what they said?
Don't do it?
You got it. That's exactly what they said. There's a resolution by the 7 Idaho counties that are involved in this. All 7 of them passed a unanimous resolution. You know what they said? Don't do it. There's been letters signed unanimously by the Friends of Minidoka and the larger Japanese American community inside and outside of Idaho. And you know what they said? Don't do it. You've received a letter from myself, the governor, the rest of our delegation, and we've said the same thing. Don't do it. So let me close with this. Don't do it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Secretary Haaland. I'll start the questions, and my first question would be to you. I think last year we asked you to commit that the overdue 5-year leasing program for offshore oil and gas will actually contain lease sales. We still don't have the program in place, and we know that you don't plan to finalize the program until December of this year at the earliest, which is 18 months late. Additionally, the department has not started the environmental review process for the 2024 sales, which makes it very unlikely that you're going to do any leasing next year in 2024. Because the IRA ties wind leasing to oil and gas, failing to take an all-of-the-above approach to energy security puts the administration at risk of taking a none-of-the-above approach. They'll get nothing. That's how important this is. So maybe you can explain to me the time and why it's taking so long and why your intentions are so far behind from what we had asked for and what the law has said.
Thank you, Chairman, for the question. And first, I'll say that the reason the 5-year plan is behind is because the previous administration dropped the ball and stopped working on the plan. Our staff picked it up. They started working on it. We expect the final plan out in September. Of course, we understand fully, we're mindful of the provisions of the IRA, and we will follow the law with respect to leasing. And I want to say that we are moving this forward, and we'll be happy to keep you apprised of the process.
My only comment on that would be I think the previous administration still did leasing in a timely fashion, from what we understand, unless you have a different calculation of that or a different review, unless you didn't like what was done. I don't know.
Senator, I was talking in respect to the 5-year plan. You asked why it was late.
Okay. Permitting the Department of Interior simply taking too long both for the energy security goals and our environmental goals. According to the Council on Environmental Quality from 2010 to 2018, DOI's environmental impact statements average 5 years to get to a record decision. 5 years. Furthermore, basic Fish and Wildlife Service reviews that used to be completed within weeks are taking months, while leaders from the BLM and other agencies are blaming permitting delays on a lack of funding for staffing. The IRA allocated $150 million to Interior, specifically dedicated to permitting, on top of the $500 million in conservation and resilient funding split between the National Park Service and the Bureau of Land Management. The department and its agency also are able to access the IRA's $350 million of transferable funding from the Federal Permitting Improvement Steering Committee. Have you all spent all that money? I mean, is it all gone and you're deficient now, and that's why you're not able to do it on time?
Senator, thank you for the question. And of course, we understand that permitting does take a long time. You can't just open a can and spill out a permit. It takes a lot of research and work by the career staff, and they're dedicated. You know that we have approved many, many permits since the beginning of this administration, since January 2021. There, with respect to drilling permits, the applications to drill were moved forward. There's nearly 7,000 currently unused.
Do you all support, as an agency, the permitting reforms that you're hearing both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, both saying that we need? And have you all been able to give us some ideas or some support on how we can expedite this?
Senator, I recognize that that's a continuous issue, and I can't speak to whether the administration supports or doesn't support. However, we will continue to do our jobs and move all of those permits forward. And we have done a tremendous amount of work. As I mentioned, there are nearly 7,000 permits currently that are unused. They kept processing permits since we came into office.
Excuse me, are there any codes that we could clear up or try to change or be helpful towards the permitting process and expediting it? No matter what side of the fence you may be on, an all-in energy policy means we have to do everything. And for that, renewables are having the same challenges that fossil. And what we're needing is a way forward if we're going to do anything.
Yes, thank you, Senator, or Chairman. I appreciate your willingness to help us with that issue. And of course, we'll be happy to stay in touch with your office and work together to expedite things.
Senator Brasso. Senator Hoeven.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary, I'd like to pick up on a question that Senator Cortez Masto just asked you. She asked, why spend time on land, BLM land, with federal lands that have low potential for leasing for energy development? So I'm going to ask you the other side of that, the converse. Why are you blocking development on land that has high potential for energy development? Right now, you've issued a draft resource management plan that affects my state of North Dakota. It will block 45% of the potential federal oil and gas acreage and 95% of the federal coal acreage. So, she asked the question, well, why would you waste your time on lands that aren't going to be leased for energy? But why are you blocking the development on lands that can produce energy at a time when gasoline prices are higher and we need more electricity and more baseload dependability for our grid, and you're blocking the federal leases that we need to produce that energy? Why is that?
Senator, I would say that there is a process that we go through when we think about the leases that we have, the lease sales that we have to have. It isn't so much blocking as it is assessing what lands are available and which lands should be up for lease.
But you're not putting them up for lease. You not only are blocking development, you've raised royalty rates, and as a result, energy prices are higher. Why wouldn't you allow our energy producers to produce more energy here at home to bring prices down at the pump, to reduce prices for hardworking consumers across America?
Senator, oil production is at an all-time high on federal public lands here in our country. There's a lot that goes into determining the price of gas. If it were just supply, then prices would be low right now because we're doing our jobs, and that is the truth. There's more oil that's being produced currently than there ever has been in our country.
No. What you like to refer to is because New Mexico had a lot of leases that were leased out prior to your administration and they're now being developed. There's a spike in New Mexico on federal development. But states like mine my state's down 500,000 barrels. We've gone from 1.5 million barrels a day. We're down to about 1 million to 1.1 million barrels a day. And overall, the production in the United States is down under this administration, not up. So I know you want to do that selectively to try to make your case, but it doesn't work. Prices are higher. We had Secretary Granholm in front of us, and she agreed with me that more supply helps bring prices down. So prices are higher. So so tell me, do you think more supply brings prices down or not? Would you agree with that or not?
Senator, in 2022, oil production on federal lands in North Dakota was higher than in 2020.
But our total production is down 500,000 barrels because we're blocked from producing more on the federal lands, which you are now blocking us from doing. And remember, there's a lag between when you lease, when you get the drilling permit, and when you get the production. And you're telling, okay, so by your logic then, by raising royalty rates and blocking production, which again, you add more regulations to keep blocking us, you're saying that produces more supply. That's your argument. By blocking production on federal lands and increasing royalty rates, your argument is that is producing more energy?
Senator, there is a process, of course.
No, just,
to the
if you would
leasing
just
that
ask
we
my
do.
question, please.
Oil production is up. Oil production on federal lands is at an all-time.
Okay, so when you provide a lease, the very same day the production starts, is that your argument?
No, Senator.
So if there's a
obviously.
whole lag process here, and you're utilizing that to make an argument, you're also again, back to my question. So your policies to restrict development, the chairman, his opening question to you was, when are you going to allow production offshore? My whole question to you is, by blocking production, raising royalty rates, which is your policy, you feel that produces more supply and lower energy. And the corollary, and actually, now this time, if you would please answer the question, and also, would you rather get that energy here at home, where we have the best environmental standards, or would you rather continue blocking it here at home and get it from places like Venezuela and other adversaries like in OPEC?
Senator, as I mentioned earlier, there are nearly 7,000 permits across the country that are not being used. Companies have nearly 400 approved permits to drill on federal lands and Indian land in North Dakota that they haven't used. There are 226 approved permits on federal land and 166 approved permits on Indian land in North Dakota. So I'm happy
Many of which are blocked by your regulation or the courts where they have to litigate. You don't get a lease and produce it the next day, Madam Secretary. Would you agree with that, at least?
Well, of course, and that's why when the applications for permits to drill come into the department, our staff works very hard to move those forward, and they have done that since January 2021. They have moved those applications forward, and that's the reason why there's nearly 7,000 unused permits in our country.
Then why are energy prices higher at the pump?
I think there's a lot that goes in to determine the cost of gasoline,
But the
Senator. I
consumer
think
still-
you know that as well.
The consumer still pulls up that pump and pays a lot more, and we need
And
more supply.
And I understand, I raised my child as a single mom. I know what it's like to not have enough money to either pay your rent or pay your student loans or buy groceries. I get that. And that's why we're working hard at the department to move our goals forward, to move these issues forward. There are 226 approved permits on federal land in North Dakota.
Mr. Chairman, one final question. A federal district judge has now ordered that you continue lease sales on a quarterly basis. Are you going to do it? He's ordered you to continue the quarterly lease auctions that you are holding up. Will you comply with the court order?
Senator, we will follow the law to the best of our ability. Thank you.